LoveLore Library. Chapter 109. Even though she had lived in this world for more than 10 years, Jingwan had only heard about the grand occasion where the top scholar, the second scholar, and the third scholar paraded through the streets. It was only her first year in the capital and she had already encountered such a lively event. Naturally, she wanted to join in. It had to be said that in this imperial examination, there were 3 people in the first place, while the first, second, and third places were the real deal. Moreover, there was only one every 3 years. It was unlike his previous life, where there were many top scorers here and there. What were the second and third place scorers? He had never heard of them, and there were new ones every year. Alright, he had to admit that they were also very good. However, in comparison, this imperial examination was much more difficult, right? All the examinees in the country, from a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, and even decades ago, were all gathered together. It was like thousands of soldiers fighting over a single log bridge. As for the specifics, Jingwan had not personally experienced it, so she did not comment. She just watched and enjoyed it. Jingwan and the others came from the minister's residence, so they had already booked a good restaurant. Anyway, at this time, the people on both sides of the street, no matter what business they were doing, did not think about making money. They just wanted to watch the fun. As for the restaurants, tea houses, and private rooms, they had already been booked by the officials and nobles. Of course, they could take advantage of this to make a profit. After all, other than the private rooms, it was not easy to raise the price for the nobles. There was also the main hall below. At this time, even if the price was a little higher, no one would bargain. Even those jewelry stores, rouge and powder stores, as long as the second and third floors were basically occupied. Of course, most of these places were still occupied by women of high status. When they left, they would probably take away a lot of things that would make the shopkeepers smile from year to year. In the process of waiting, if there was nothing to do, they would eat some food, drink some tea, and chat idly. Because of special reasons, the place was only so big, but there were too many people watching the fun, so it was inevitable that they would share a place with others. For example, in this private room of the Luo family, there were many juniors of the Luo family's relatives and friends. Fortunately, relatives could occasionally meet each other, and there were many people, so there was no need to pay special attention to the boundaries between men and women. Even so, there was a clear distinction between men and women. Jingwan didn't know many of them. Thinking about it, after entering the capital, she spent more time with people outside and made more friends. Then, she gradually understood the reason. It was nothing more than a matter of status. Although her status was low compared to Sun Yijia and the others, her status was still much higher than these people. Even if her father's official position was about the same, she still had a grandfather who was a first-rank official. Furthermore, she was doted on by her grandmother. These were all things that raised her status. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the most honorable girl in the Luo Shangshu. Usually, there would be people coming to the Luo family from time to time, but there were very few people who were worthy of being received by old Madame Luo personally. Madame Wang was more than enough to receive them. It was good enough to have the opportunity to meet old Madame Luo and greet her. After Jingwan entered the capital, she basically didn't have any free time. Therefore, old Madame Luo basically didn't let Jingwan come out to entertain these girls. Jingwan's reputation in the capital was now well known. It could be said that she was as famous as Sun Yijia and Wan Fangfei, or even better than the two of them. However, her limelight was temporary. If she didn't do anything eye-catching for a long time, she would probably gradually be forgotten. Unlike the two of them, who relied on their own talents to accumulate over the years. The above was enough. It was enough for these girls to curry favor with her. Most of the girls actually didn't have any bad intentions. At most, they just wanted to use their friendship to increase their own value. This was very normal. As long as they didn't do it too deliberately, act too lowly, or have bad intentions, Jingwan could talk to them calmly. If she could meet someone who was compatible with her, she didn't mind having another little sister. Of course, after a round, Jingwan felt that she was thinking too much. After all, they were different from her. At least in terms of thinking, they couldn't be open and had a strong sense of hierarchy. When they talked to her, they always had a purpose and were very careful. Even if she didn't dislike them for being childish, there was no possibility of them becoming friends. Along with the faint sound of gongs and drums, the crowd began to boil. She's here, she's here. Everyone knew that the person they were waiting for had finally appeared. The older brothers of the Luo family were all there. Although it wasn't the first time they had seen such a scene, when the younger sisters went out, they were duty-bound to escort them. Because the girls were too excited, they all squeezed towards the window. Jingwan frowned slightly. It was better for her to step back a little. But because she was close to the window from the beginning, it wasn't easy for her to step back now. A hand reached out from the side, grabbed her arm, and pulled her in that direction. Jingwan raised her head. Seeing that it was her brother, she smiled and walked over with his strength. Because he was a man, the other girls who looked at him blushing and refused to look away subconsciously avoided him. Then, Jingwan smoothly occupied the best position on the man's side. Seeing Luo Jingbue do this, the other girls of the Luo family were also brought over one by one. They did it naturally and felt guilty for not doing anything. If you're a man, step back. Luo Jingbue said with a bit of a smile. Jingbue, you can't be like this. You can't disregard your brotherhood just to please your younger sister. That's right, that's right. The others also joined in, but they didn't have any ill intentions. Luo Jingbue lifted the corner of his mouth. The people parading the streets are all men. It's fine to let the girls see something new. What, do you want to throw down some sachets, handkerchiefs, or something like that? As soon as he said this, many people had goosebumps. Even if they wanted to join in the fun, they didn't dare to look. They all cursed Luo Jingbue. Speaking of which, Luo Jingbue didn't have to be polite to these brothers who often hung out with each other. Laughing and scolding were common occurrences. One had to know that currently, even when facing his grandfather, Luo Peishan, he wasn't as angry as when facing his younger sister. Wherever his younger sister was, he had to protect and take good care of her. Everything else just stood aside. Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed. Her brother's character was really good. He was open-minded and didn't care about trifles. He was straightforward and didn't have many sneaky thoughts. After being with him for a long time, one would probably feel happy. However, one shouldn't think that he was especially naive and ignorant of worldly affairs. In fact, with his grandfather, Luo Peishan, teaching him from time to time, none of the brothers of the Luo family were good people when it came to serious matters. The group of young masters were all pushed to the back, so the girls in front didn't have to squeeze too much. Look, they're coming, a young girl at the side shouted excitedly. And Jingwan also saw them. They were tall horses with big red flowers tied together with red silk on their chests. The top scorer in the middle looked to be in his 30s. His facial features were very regular and square. It was said that one's appearance was born from one's heart. It wasn't completely unreasonable. This person gave others the feeling that he was at least an upright gentleman. On the top scorer, he looked to be in his 30s. Moreover, Jingwan could faintly see the shadow of Elder Jiang on him. Was he from the Jiang family? Needless to say, the top scorer on the right had a handkerchief, a sachet, and even some flowers that never stopped. Jingwan wasn't surprised that Qin Jingmin could appear. The people of the Luo family weren't surprised either. Third Miss Luo, you must have specially come to see the top scorer. A young girl at the side pretended to tease and said. When these words were said, the people of the Luo family were stunned. Even the younger siblings who were in their early teens couldn't help but look at Jingwan's expression. They might have been hidden from the adults about Li Ruyu causing trouble at their door, but they basically knew that their third sister had broken off the engagement. Perhaps they didn't know what this meant, but they knew that it wasn't a good thing. Jingwan was also very helpless about this. She clearly didn't care, but some people felt that she was very sad. Now that her ex-fiancé had become the top scorer and was favored by the ladies, she was probably even sadder. Jingwan smiled faintly. Before the court examination results are out, who knows who the top 3 will be? I'm just like everyone else. I'm just here for the fun. Looking at the 3 people who were getting closer and closer, the smile on Jingwan's face suddenly widened. Those who didn't know would think that she was proud of the person who came in third, but those who knew were a little confused. Third sister, what are you smiling about? Luo Qi asked curiously. Third sister feels that the 3 of them must be in a state of ice and fire. What do you mean? There are so many things falling on their bodies. It must be very painful, but they can't avoid it. They must be really happy. Is this considered a state of ice and fire? If third sister didn't mention it, I wouldn't have noticed. There are so many things falling on their bodies. If there are beads in the sachets and they don't pay attention, they might be bruised after the parade. Once these words were spoken, everyone looked at each other in dismay. In that case, this parade was actually a very torturous thing to do. Jingwan turned around and asked her brothers, are there any students who have failed the exam, out of jealousy and vengeance, who purposely took advantage of this time to put stones in their sachets? She asked her brothers curiously. I don't think so. Luo Jingde said uncertainly. But you can't rule out this possibility. Who knows? Because of the special occasion, those people will definitely be careful and only throw stones on their bodies. Little sister, I told you that you can only bear with it. So, Luo Jingbo touched his chin. If you have the chance, ask Jingmin. At this moment, there were screams coming from below. It seemed that Xie Zhuangyuan's nose was bleeding. Could it be? Jingwan covered her mouth with a brocade handkerchief. Did she have the potential to jinx it? The parade stopped, and it seemed that Xie Zhuangyuan was seriously injured. Several brothers of the Luo family came forward, and some girls spontaneously stepped back. Luo Jingde looked outside carefully. It seems that someone is deliberately making trouble. Jingwan also noticed that it was not only Xie Zhuangyuan who was injured. If Jingwan was right, Chen Jingmin should have been hit the most. It was just that he was not unlucky enough to be hit on his face. He seemed to be holding something in his hand. Although there was no expression on his face, the veins on the back of his hand were almost popping out. It seemed that he was really angry, or maybe he was really in pain. Chen Jingmin was 16 years old. There were many people in their 40s and 50s in the spring examination. There were even some in their 50s and 60s. They had worked hard for many years, but still failed. Seeing them in high spirits and Chen Jingmin's success at such a young age, it was inevitable that he would feel unbalanced. The rational ones might just feel jealous in their hearts and leave sadly. But in a moment of anger, it was normal to do something impulsive. Xie Zhuangyuan's nose was simply treated. His nostrils were stuffed, and the parade continued. However, things obviously didn't end there. Some of the city guards rushed into the crowd and mercilessly pressed a few people to the ground and quickly dragged them away. No, they are not from the city defense team. Luo Jingde said. They are from the blackguard. The man on the horse in front of them is Sui Qianshi of the blackguard. Luo Jingbo said. Jingwan heard this and looked over. The leader of the parade was a young man in his early 20s. His face was a little sharp, and there was a faint evil spirit. Jingwan was not sure if the blackguard was the same as the genie guards in the history of the previous world. If it was, then this group of people was really not to be trifled with. It seems that this situation has been expected. Otherwise, the blackguard would not have been dispatched. Luo Jingbue said again. I also know this Zhuang Yuan. He is from the Xie family. As for the second place, he is from the Jiang family. It seems that only Xing Min can be considered as a person from a humble family. Sure enough, in this aspect, the gentry has the advantage. Luo Jingde continued. Zhuang Yuan is representing the Xie family. If he continues to parade with this dignity, then the Xia family will be laughed at for a period of time. Luo Jingming, the second young master of the Luo family, continued his cousin's words. Today's event can be considered to be extremely lively. As the parade went away, the people who had already seen it were satisfied. They did not continue to swarm forward. Instead, they left in groups of 2s and 3s. Some of the young ladies of the common family were laughing and joking with each other. 99% of the people were purely there to watch the fun. The real common people at the bottom did not have any feelings of jealousy. They were born at the foot of the imperial city and grew up at the foot of the imperial city. It was enough for them to be safe and happy. As the crowd gradually dispersed, the street was quickly cleaned up. People continued to do what they were supposed to do. There was no trace of the previous bustle. On the day of Great Elder Princess's birthday, the flower that my father brought back died the next day for some reason. My father was very distressed. Miss Luo, do you know the reason? Ruan Fangfei suddenly said. What other reason can it be? The lowly thing can't adapt to our mansion. A person behind Ruan Fangfei immediately made an excuse disdainfully. Xiaowu, what nonsense are you talking about? Shut up. The beauty's face darkened, but still had a different beauty. The young man immediately shut up and begged Ruan Fangfei for mercy with a smile. Jingwan knew very well that even if she ignored the flower, it could live for 10 days to half a month. It was impossible for it to die in one night. There was only one reason, that was, it was man-made. However, in the Ruan family, who dared to touch Lord Ruan's things? Jingwan thought of Ruan Fangfei's previous guess. Was she really that kind of person? Ruan Fangfei noticed that the way Jingwan looked at her changed slightly. Did she feel something? That was more interesting. She would definitely be more interesting than those people who died without knowing anything. She was gentle, kind, open-minded, and steady. In her father's words, she was a phoenix among men, far better than herself. She just didn't know that such a person would one day lose her reputation. Oh, right, it was a scandal that she had done herself. She didn't know if those people who praised her would be heartbroken because of her misjudgment. That scene must be very good. The smile on the corner of her mouth became more obvious. Ruan Fangfei had never thought that she was that kind of person in essence. She didn't need others to frame her. When her ugliness was exposed in front of people, it really made many people want to dig their own eyes out. Jingwan's heart skipped a beat. Did she meet a pervert? Or a pervert who inexplicably targeted her? However, Jingwan immediately straightened her attitude. In her previous life, she had encountered a lot of things in the last few years. She had met many different kinds of people. If she really met one, she would just deal with their moves as they came. Who was afraid of who? The others probably didn't notice the back and forth between Jingwan and Ruan Fangfei. Towards the Ruan family's words, there were naturally people who were angry, especially Luo Jingbue, who had a sister complex now. A lowly thing, that was also brought back by the Grand Secretary. A lowly thing that was fancied by your grandfather. What do you mean by this? Are you questioning your grandfather? Or is it that in your eyes, your grandfather is also a lowly thing? You. That youth's face flushed red in anger. Xiao Wu, I told you to shut up. Sorry, Miss Luo, young Master Luo, my nephew is not sensible. We definitely didn't mean that. We simply wanted to ask Miss Luo if you know the reason. Ruan Fangfei apologized very sincerely. The Luo family's faces relaxed. Miss Ruan, you don't need to apologize. It's just a small matter. It's not to the extent that the elders should apologize for the juniors. Jingwan didn't care about the other side's change of expression. As for the death of one knight, the biggest possibility is that the root was injured. Maybe it was a child's mischief, or maybe someone accidentally spilled hot water on it. Ruan Fangfei seemed to be enlightened, or it's because the servants didn't take it seriously. This idea was really vicious. Now, Jingwan was at least 70% sure that it was done by Ruan Fangfei. Naturally, there were not only these two families here. Other families appeared one after another. Even those who had a higher status than Jingwan took the initiative to greet her. It could be seen that what happened in Great Elder Princess's mansion had a great impact. Ruan Fangfei received the same enthusiasm as before, but she was unhappy in her heart. They parted ways and went their separate ways. Jingwan saw that her sisters seemed to be very interested in the outside world. In fact, she was also a little interested. After all, she hadn't had a good time since she came to the capital. However, today was indeed not the right time. Luo Jingbo got married only 3 days ago, and the family was still busy. It was not easy for them to come out and join in the fun today. After a few days, I'll take you out for a walk. Jingwan was a little rich woman among the sisters of the Luo family. As for how much money she had, no one knew, but it was definitely not a small amount. If they went out with her, they would naturally get some benefits. Luo Qi knew this best, so she nodded vigorously. After returning to the Luo family, they went back to their own courtyards and went to the begonia house. Miss, I think there is something wrong with Miss Ruan. You'd better stay away from her in the future. Not only did Li Hongyuan tell Nanny Gong, but Nanny Gong also noticed the clue. Before leaving the capital, Nanny Gong was also Li Hongyuan's secret guard, but these secret guards had their own things. Nanny Gong might have been prepared by Li Hongyuan for Jingwan from the beginning, so she had less time to show up and didn't know much about Ruan Fangfei. The Ruan Fangfei she knew was also the one the world knew. Li Hongyuan did not deliberately remind her. Before she entered the capital, she had told Jingwan about Ruan Fangfei. Most of the things she said about Ruan Fangfei were positive. After being in close contact with her, even if she still knew nothing about the real Ruan Fangfei, she would probably feel something. Nanny, don't worry. I won't have any contact with her under normal circumstances. If I really meet her, I'll be careful. Nanny Gong looked at Jingwan and asked, Miss, you've noticed it. How can I not notice when I'm being targeted? Nanny Gong raised her eyebrows. So, Ruan Fangfei deliberately showed her tail in front of Miss and let her notice it at the same time. That was right. If not, Ruan Fangfei would be the first to be noticed by her father. There will be a Qianglin banquet tonight. Probably tomorrow, the matter between Li Ruyu and cousin Min will be solved. In fact, Lu Qingdi was anxious. Before tomorrow, before lunchtime, Jingwan received a message from Madame Luo that she would be taken to the palace in the afternoon. She didn't say anything more. Jingwan was speechless. Grandma really trusted her so much. Was she sure that she wouldn't be timid? And didn't she have any taboos about what she was wearing? Well, Nanny Gong used to be an aunt in charge in the palace. Although she had little power, she still remembered the rules and etiquette clearly. Did Jingwan have stage fright? Of course not. In her previous life, she was taken by her scumbag father to see the world when she was only the size of a palm. As she grew up, that scumbag climbed higher and higher, and the people she met were naturally of higher status. It would be strange if she had stage fright when she was used to it. After lunch, Jingwan dressed up and went to the main courtyard. Then, for the first time, she saw Madame Luo in the dress of a first-rank madam. She felt a little different from the usual Madame Luo. Even though she still had the same expression, she still made people feel that she was much more dignified. Madame Luo looked at Jingwan from head to toe and nodded with satisfaction. Nanny Gong is very attentive. Madame Luo, you flatter me. It's my job. Because her skills were not as good as other places, Jingwan only brought Nanny Gong with her, and Madame Luo only brought a steady maid. It was Jingwan's first time coming to a place like the palace. It was not much different from the ancient ruins she saw in her previous life. There were carved railings and painted buildings, and it was magnificent. However, those in her previous life were probably just for people to visit, and it lacked the aura of people who lived there for a long time. The biggest characteristic of the palace was probably its strict rules and tight security. They got off the carriage outside the palace gate, and then they had to walk step by step to show respect to the royal family. However, the palace was such a big place. It was okay for young people, but if they were older, it would be a bit difficult to walk all the way to the harem. Fortunately, it was already spring, and there was no coldness of winter, nor the heat of summer. Otherwise, it would be even more annoying. The royal family only cared about their dignity and did not care about human feelings. It was really unlikable. Jingwan was in good health, so there was no problem for her to walk faster or slower. However, Madame Luo could not. At first, she could barely maintain her speed, but later, she became slower and slower. In these years, Jingwan spent a lot of effort to take care of Madame Luo's health. She could not ignore Madame Luo's health just to not let those so-called nobles wait for a long time. Therefore, when Madame Luo wanted to speed up, she deliberately slowed down. Wan. Madame Luo did not know what to do with Jingwan's temper. When it came to her health, her granddaughter was like a stubborn donkey. No matter what anyone said, it was useless. Her slow speed was comparable to taking a stroll after a meal to aid digestion. It was very leisurely. The eunuch leading the way could not help but urge, "Hurry up, nobles." Jingwan pulled a long face. "Don't you see that my grandmother is old and can't walk fast? What if she gets tired? Can you bear the responsibility? Or are you saying that after becoming a eunuch, you have forgotten your ancestors and don't know filial piety? Even if you don't know, the words of respect for the elderly set by the founding ancestor are just empty words. Nobles, and so on, what can they do? If they can't wait, they should prepare the sedan earlier. Could it be that their own mother and grandmother also rely on a pair of legs to enter the palace and have to be in a hurry?" The more Jingwan said, the angrier she became. What was this all about? The eunuch's face suddenly darkened. Jingwan's words were not malicious. She even accused her of despising the founding ancestor. "You, Wan." Madame Luo was also anxious. These words were really disgraceful. How could she lose her sense of propriety at this time? What? Despising nobles. Disrespecting the royal family. Is 20 strokes enough? If not, add 20 more. Did Jingwan not have a temper? Sorry, when her temper was up, even 9 oxen could not pull her back. Although there were only a few people nearby, further away, there were palace servants coming and going, as well as palace guards. Jingwan did not deliberately lower her voice. Almost everyone heard it. Hiss, whose family's daughter was this? She was too bold. Jingwan's face darkened. The eunuch also knew that he had met a stubborn master. What should he do? Admit defeat. He still had some status in the Kunyi palace. If he admitted defeat this time, wouldn't everyone step on him next time? Moreover, this sedan was not ordered by the higher-ups. Who would dare to use it casually? Madame Luo saw Jingwan's stubbornness and sighed slightly. She did not say anything. In the end, this granddaughter of hers was looking out for her. For a moment, the situation was in a deadlock. What's going on? A man's voice sounded from behind. Jingwan turned around and saw 4 men getting down from the palanquin. This time, she was furious. A group of men with good arms and legs, but they don't know how to walk. They need people to carry them. The 4 lords, the 4 princes, no matter how slow they were, could see that Jingwan was angry now. Li Hongming, who just spoke, was facing Jingwan's anger directly. To be honest, from birth until now, except for Lu Qingdi and noble consort Su, no one had been angry with him. Those who dared to be angry with him would not do so easily. The rest, needless to say, were harmful. Anger flashed in his eyes, but he still smiled good-naturedly. What made 3rd Miss Luo so angry? 3rd Imperial Brother, are you blind or deaf? Li Hongyuan's pleasant voice sounded. However, sorry, Jingwan did not feel it at all. Which palace are you from? Don't you prepare a sedan to welcome Madame Luo into the palace? The eunuch who was glaring at Jingwan earlier suddenly became a soft-footed prawn and knelt on the ground with a plop. Replying to Wang, yeah, this servant is from Kunyi Palace. Oh. Someone from the Empress Palace. Although Li Hongyuan just repeated it lightly, everyone knew what he meant. Li Hongming temporarily forgot Jingwan's big disrespect, and Li Hongyi's expression was good. He did not think that his mother would make such a mistake. He took a few steps forward and kicked her. Cheap servant, you really have guts. You dare to accuse the Empress. Tell me, which palace are you from? Prince, please spare me, please spare me. This servant is really from the Kunyi Palace, really. Big brother, don't be angry. Whether you are from the Empress Palace or not, you will know later. It's more important to quickly ask someone to bring the sedan. Li Hongming turned and bowed to Madame Luo. Madame Luo has been tired. Prince is too polite. This servant is not tired. Li Hongming smiled and looked at Jingwan. 3rd Miss Luo's expression said otherwise. Jingwan was expressionless. This servant is not grandmother. Naturally, I don't know if grandmother has been tired. However, after walking for so long, this servant feels that her feet are sore. Grandmother is old but strong. Her body is probably better than this servant's, so she doesn't feel tired. After all, the old people are still active now, but young people like us have become soft bones. Walking a few more steps will tire us to death. Li Hongming choked on his sobs. It was fine if that bastard Li Hongyuan scolded him openly and secretly. He could pretend that he didn't hear it. But now that he was being scolded indirectly by a little girl, he had to endure it. It's all because of the palace's incompetence that Miss has been tired. I will definitely punish them and strictly enforce the palace rules. Those people from Kunyi Palace are pretending to be good people. What are they? Jingwan sneered in her heart, but her expression still did not ease. Li Hongyuan snickered inwardly. Wan was really becoming more and more likable. That angry appearance was really like an angry kitten. Her little claws scratched and scratched, causing people's hearts to itch. This ability to slander others with her mouth was really taught by this prince. However, one day, he must let her scold whoever she wants. She can point at the other party's nose and scold them until they don't dare to say a word. Moreover, she doesn't need to beat around the bush. The matters in the palace are handled by the Empress and Mufei. Now that there are no courtiers, third imperial brother doesn't need to pretend for anyone. You don't feel tired. Lao Lu, Jingwan seemed to have heard the sound of Rui Qinhuang gritting his teeth. She shot a glance at Jin Qinhuang. Living a life of suffocation and humiliation, going to curry favor with others in exchange for affection, it was better to live a happy and carefree life, acting recklessly and oppressing others. This living king of hell was considered to have done this to the extreme. Unfortunately, not many people had his capital. Just at this time, another person hurried over with 2 small palanquins. Without saying a word, he directly knelt down to beg for forgiveness. Wang Ye, it's this old servant's dereliction of duty. In a moment of carelessness, this old servant has made a mistake. Wang Ye, please punish me. This was the steward of Kunyi Palace and was deeply trusted by the Empress. Li Hongyi naturally would not punish him. Just as he was about to appease him, the living king of hell spoke again. Since it's like this, then hand this matter over to the steward of the inner court to investigate. As a person of the Empress Palace, doing something like neglecting a court official's wife can be resolved with a word of dereliction of duty. You all did not do your job well. Not only did you implicate the Empress' reputation, but you also gained the reputation of being lax in governing. If you all are not removed and replaced, wouldn't it be difficult to establish the Empress' dignity? Li Hongyuan, you. Li Hongyi's gaze was as if he wanted to eat Li Hongyuan alive. What, does eldest imperial brother have an opinion about Ben Wang? Or is it that Ben Wang said something wrong? Jingwan slightly raised her eyebrows. Should she say that he was indeed the living king of hell? Grabbing a handle, he directly stepped on it to death. Ask Prince Rui, did he dare to say this? Did he dare to so brazenly offend the Empress? Even Luqing Emperor had to give the Empress some face many times. Even if the people of the Empress Palace were in the wrong, it was also handed over to the Empress to deal with. The steward of Kunyi Palace directly collapsed to the ground. He had a grudge with the steward of the inner court. This time, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. He regretted it. He shouldn't have allowed his subordinates to plot against each other just because he received benefits. Originally, this kind of thing had happened before, but as a woman with a title, in the end, she could only grit her teeth and persevere. She apologized, and the other side naturally wouldn't shout for her master to come forward. This kind of thing didn't only happen in Kunyi Palace. However, today, he met Jingwan, this kind of person who didn't care about anything and made a scene because she loved her grandmother. He also ran into the hands of the living king of hell, so he completely fell. Prince Kong was angry, Prince Rui was happy, and Prince Gong pretended to be mute from beginning to end. He probably thought that Li Hongyuan was helping imperial concubine Su. In fact, if you make Ben Wang's wife unhappy, you can go die. This was the real reason. Halfway through, they parted ways. Several princes went to see Luqing Emperor. Jingwan and old Madame Luo's group went directly to Kunyi Palace. It could be assumed that this matter had already been known by many people. There were a lot of people in Kunyi Palace. Not to mention the main imperial concubines, there were also many imperial concubines, and even a white-haired old prince, who was said to be a character of Luqing Emperor's grandfather's generation. The Empress was also a person who could put down her status. After Jingwan and old Madame Luo bowed, she directly apologized to old Madame Luo. As for the matter of her being replaced, she didn't even frown, and didn't mention a word. You're the Luo family's third miss. You're really a beautiful girl. The Empress smiled gently. In the depths of her eyes, there was an unknown shock. It could be said that she had been raised to be an empress since she was young, but this little girl had the self-restraint that she had after being an empress for several years. Most importantly, this was not something that was cultivated, but something that was naturally brought out from her bones. Isn't that so? This empress also likes you very much. Imperial concubine Su said with a smile. The corners of her eyes were completely open. She was naturally charming, but there was also a trace of heroism, causing her entire aura to be fully released. She was not inferior to the empress. So what if the nobles wait? Did you say that? The originally peaceful atmosphere was broken by a sentence. Jingwan looked in the direction of the voice. This was the first time she saw such a naturally resentful face. The corners of her eyes were drooping, and the corners of her mouth were drooping. There were crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, and her eyes were cloudy, but she still looked like she had just cried. How could this kind of appearance enter the imperial family? Yes, this subject said so. You're quite bold. All right, the little girl was just angry and didn't choose her words carefully. Besides, we have nothing to do. We haven't dealt with the emperor yet, and Princess Consort Ching and her daughter haven't entered the palace yet. So what if we wait? We're already so old, why are we still arguing with a little girl? The white-haired old prince spoke. Many of his teeth had fallen out, so his speech was uneven, but he spoke slowly, showing his excellent manners. The dignity of the royal family cannot be undermined, I said, that's enough. The old prince glanced at the old princess consort, telling her to shut up. The other sisters-in-law of the same generation, and the younger niece-in-law, all curled their lips in disdain. She always talked about the dignity of the royal family, but the only one who could truly represent the dignity of the royal family was the emperor. His son and the empress had some status, but the others who were gradually drifting away from him were not the same. If she wasn't Emperor Li's elder, how could she have the right to sit here? Dream on. It was mainly because Li Ruyu's scandal this time was too embarrassing. Now that they knew, they couldn't not ask. In fact, they just needed to listen. They didn't have the right to interrupt. Then, Princess Consort Ching and Li Ruyu arrived. Jingwan glanced at Li Ruyu. She didn't look too good, and her clothes weren't the usual flamboyant red. Was she pretending to be pitiful? When she met Jingwan's eyes, she instinctively wanted to curse, little. Fortunately, she realized where she was and swallowed it back. It seemed that it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. A beating was too light. However, after that, Li Ruyu was exceptionally well-behaved. She had no choice but to be well-behaved. Everyone's gazes landed on her. They were like knives that wanted to slice her alive. A young lady like Li Ruyu couldn't take it. She couldn't stop trembling. His Majesty has arrived. Li Ruyu was immediately thrown aside, and everyone stood up to welcome him. Emperor Li strode in, followed by the 4 people Jingwan had met before, and 2 older princes, Prince Qing, Luo Peishan, and Qin Jingmin. Qin Jingmin, who was walking at the back, saw Jingwan at first glance. He secretly clenched his fists, then relaxed them, looked away, and lowered his eyes. After Emperor Li sat down on the main seat, everyone knelt down to greet him. Emperor Li hurriedly asked them to get up. He first asked the granduncle, who was a little inconvenient to move, about the food, clothes, and whether the servants served him well. Jingwan could feel that Lu Qingdi was genuinely concerned about his elders and was not acting. After a while, Emperor Li's eyes fell on Jingwan. After looking at her for a while, he suddenly laughed. I didn't know that you, little girl, are so bold and have a bad temper. You also know that you will be beaten if you don't respect the imperial family. Tell me, should I beat you or not? Whether you beat me or not, it all depends on your Majesty. You are the boss, everything is up to you. I asked you, but you threw it back to me. But since you dared to say that 20 is not enough, I think you are not afraid of being beaten. Your Majesty, not being afraid is one thing, not thinking is another. This subject's daughter is not afraid of being beaten, but I don't want to be beaten. Little girl, you are quite cunning. For the sake of you finding me a few talents, I won't beat you. Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. I am also doing it for the sake of your filial piety. I heard from your grandfather that when you were in chief and manor, you personally took care of your grandmother. It is really commendable that you can do this at such a young age. Grandmother dotes on me and protects me. She treats this subject's daughter like a pearl and a treasure. Then, this subject's daughter should take care of grandmother. According to what you said, if your grandmother didn't treat you well, would you not be filial to her? Your Majesty, if this subject's daughter said that this subject's daughter is still filial to her wholeheartedly even though grandmother trampled this subject's daughter like mud, would you believe it? This subject's daughter has always believed that the feelings between people are mutual. If only one party gives and the other party is indifferent, or even ignores it, then sooner or later, one's heart will be cold. This subject's daughter does not think that she is a foolish filial person. Perhaps I will still do my part, but that is from the perspective of an outsider. For example, if grandmother is ill and I don't take care of her by her bed, but hide far away and copy Buddhist scriptures, saying that I am praying for grandmother's well-being, who can say that I am not? If I don't ask her what medicine she takes or what diet she eats, and only ask a few perfunctory questions when paying respects to her, won't others be able to blame me? Luqingdi narrowed his eyes and stared at Jingwan for a long time. Jingwan herself didn't feel anything, but the people around her broke out in a cold sweat for her. What she said was really against filial piety, but as she said, who could say that she was wrong? Luqingdi suddenly smiled. Girl, you really dare to say that. This subject's daughter knows that these are all facts. There is nothing that I dare not say. That's not right. There are some facts that few people dare to say. When Luqingdi said this, both his tone and expression were a little cold. Some people present had cold sweat on their backs. What Jingwan said was exactly what they did. That's for an outsider to see. That was the worst part. However, as the emperor, it was a serious crime for his son to pry into his illness. So these were all bullshit. Whether or not they had the heart, was not only reflected in this point. Luqingdi recovered his smile in an instant. Little girl, go sit in the side hall first, or go outside for a walk. After I deal with this matter, you can come back and chat with me. Yes, Your Majesty. Jingwan bowed to the others one by one and smiled at Madame Luo before leaving. Madame Luo, I heard a lot about that little girl from Minister Luo. How about you tell me about your affairs in Chief and Mansion? If Your Majesty doesn't find those trivial matters annoying, this subject's wife will tell you everything. Madame Luo knew what Luqingdi wanted to hear. Our family's third daughter is a good child who has been doted on since she was young. She said that the feelings are mutual, which is true. This subject's wife was seriously ill in the early years, and it was very repetitive. Wanwan didn't do anything else but accompany me all day. I told her to stay away so that she wouldn't pass the illness, but she always smiled and said that she wasn't afraid. If you were really angry and drove her away, she would come back in less than 2 hours. She would tell you in a soft voice what she had done in the past 2 hours, what she had seen, where a beautiful flower had bloomed, where a bird had fallen from a tree, or what story she had heard from the teacher. She would tell you everything in great detail. For a person who was sick and couldn't leave the house, there was nothing more comforting than hearing these things. When you were really tired, she would be quiet again. I don't know if that girl knows something, but I don't know how many times I could see her when I opened my eyes. Whether she was reading or writing, she would always find out what I needed before the servant girls. Before you could open your mouth, she would sweetly call you grandmother. That soft and gentle voice could instantly calm the panic in my heart. Madame Luo was immersed in the meeting. As she spoke, she couldn't help but wipe her tears. In the early years, I had many grandchildren by my side, but none of them were like this girl. Even if they learned from Wan, they were absent-minded. It was annoying to look at them. And every time the doctor came for an examination, Wan would be more anxious than anyone else. She would ask the doctor many questions repeatedly. Sometimes, the doctor would be impatient, but she would still keep a straight face and chase after the doctor, making the doctor afraid of her. Speaking of this, Madame Luo couldn't help but laugh. If this happened again, the doctor would tell her in detail. Wan always remembers what should be done, what shouldn't be done, what can be eaten, and what can't be eaten. She knows better than anyone else. I always told her that these things were left to the servant girls and she didn't need to do it. But she said that she would only do what she could do. Moreover, how could a servant compare to a relative? That's right, how could a servant compare to a relative? This subject believes that this subject's health improved because Wan played a far greater role than those medicines. As Wan slowly grew up, this subject could also walk outside. She would follow by your side and gently hold your hand. It was said that sick people were easily capricious. Sometimes, after walking for 2 steps, they would feel tired and not want to walk anymore. The doctor said that this subject's wife needed to walk more. She was like coaxing a child, incomparably patient and patient. In fact, she was the child that needed to be coaxed. Seeing her like this, who could bear to refuse? How could they not care for her in the depths of their hearts? Moreover, Wan had been smart since she was young. She could always think of some strange but especially useful things. This subject's wife couldn't leave the house for a long time, so she thought of a way. She had the carpenter add wheels to the chair and nail a pedal that could be placed on it. She used this method to bring this subject out. She was also worried that the roads would be uneven and bumpy, so she had people lay down bluestone slabs in and out of the residence. It could be said that she had put in a lot of effort. 3 years ago, this subject's wife, other than fourth uncle's family, was only Wan. In fact, the people in the capital didn't know that this subject's wife fell seriously ill again. This subject's illness came with a vengeance. This subject almost died. 3 days. This subject's wife was unconscious for 3 days. Wan also didn't sleep for 3 days. She probably didn't know that this subject's wife was conscious. The first time she found out, she was so angry that she didn't even recognize her family. She poured a torrent of abuse on her fourth uncle's family because they said that this subject's wife couldn't take it anymore. At that time, she couldn't swallow the medicine anymore, so she thought of ways to force it down. From the beginning to the end, she held this subject's wife's hand tightly and talked non-stop. This subject's wife could feel her tears falling on my hand, but you couldn't hear her cries. This subject's wife thought, my good granddaughter is still so young, and her mother is so unreliable. If this subject's wife left like this, she would have no one to love her, no one to take care of her, and wouldn't she have to shoulder everything on her own? How could I just leave her like this? This subject's wife had to watch her grow up, watch her get married, watch her have children, watch her live a happy life. Unfortunately, Wan's marriage didn't go well. Old Madame Luo's gaze fell on Qin Jingmin. Everyone also looked at Qin Jingmin. His head was buried so low that his expression couldn't be seen. However, everyone could feel that he was suppressing himself. He was trying his best to endure. If it wasn't for Wan, this subject's wife's grave would have grown grass long ago. This isn't just a saying. Therefore, Your Majesty, please don't blame Wan for being disrespectful to the imperial family. She didn't do it on purpose. The main thing is that this subject's health is involved. She's like a cat whose tail has been stepped on. Old madam, you're thinking too much. I originally didn't blame her, but after hearing your words, I'm even more likely to blame her. Then, now, Ryu, tell me, what exactly is going on with you scheming against Qin Jingmin? I don't want to listen to your sophistry, I just want to know what the truth is. I didn't wait for a few days in vain. I've already investigated everything that needs to be investigated. Now, I'll listen to what you have to say. As a princess of the imperial family, you did such a shameless thing and brought shame to the imperial family. If you still dare to lie, you'll be punished even more. Chapter 110. While waiting for Li Ruyu to speak, the two of them were probably not the only ones with complicated feelings. As for Luo Peishan, he really didn't know that his old wife almost died 3 years ago. He had always known that he owed his old wife a lot. Fortunately, he had an obedient and delicate granddaughter like third girl to accompany her and take care of her. Otherwise, he would have to treat his granddaughter better in the future. It wasn't just because of his old wife. As the girl said, feelings were mutual. Moreover, this girl was someone who would treat you well 10 times better if you treated her well. Wasn't Jingbo's matter the best proof? He also wanted to experience the feeling of being treated wholeheartedly by his granddaughter. Now that he thought about it, why didn't he get along well with his granddaughter at that time because of his parents' death? Why didn't he think of taking more time to accompany his sick wife? However, it was strange. According to his old wife, third girl was always by her side. Why was it that the number of times he saw her could be counted on one hand? It shouldn't be. Li Hongyuan fell into silence. Before Wan came to the capital, although he had been paying attention to her for the next few years, the hidden guards had only sent back a few words. How could he have the feelings of the person involved? He thought that he was a cold-hearted person who had seen through everything in his previous life. He even suspected that if Wan hadn't died in his previous life and he could have gotten what he wanted in the end, then when he had another chance in life, he might still want to marry Wan, but he shouldn't have such a deep obsession. But in reality, after listening to old Madame Luo's words, he felt that his obsession would only be deeper. It was said that he was the final winner in his previous life, but the victory was too tragic. He had to spend several years to rectify the situation and stabilize the country. His body couldn't take it anymore. If Wan was by his side, she would definitely be by his side at all times, taking care of him carefully and never leaving him. She has been taking care of your sickly body for 10 years. When you have a healthy body, will you abandon her? No, he would only hold her tighter in the palm of his hand, occupying all of her care and attention, stingily sharing it with others. Wan had touched him beyond his imagination. If he couldn't get what he wanted in this life, he would probably go crazy. Moreover, he had always thought that imperial concubine Su treated him wholeheartedly, except for 1 or 2 things. But obviously, that was not the case. She was truly wholeheartedly devoted to him and would definitely not mix in anything bad. The other people present, especially those old princes and princesses, used to think that their children were very filial and showed off outside from time to time. Fortunately, they didn't meet someone like Madame Luo. Otherwise, wouldn't they be waiting to be slapped in the face? It was said that without comparison, there was no way to distinguish between good and bad. Compared to Madame Luo's words, she even began to suspect that those juniors were acting. There was a saying that touched his heart the most. How could servants compare to family? Thinking back, how correct it was. If you were surrounded by servants who were meticulous and considerate, you would probably feel annoyed and rarely smile. However, if your family was by your side, even if it was just a casual chat, you would feel happy. As expected, none of those filial sons and grandsons were truly attentive. Otherwise, how could they not know what the elderly really needed? After the suspicion, they were a little angry. After the anger, they began to envy. Why didn't they meet such a good grandchild? This Luo Qinshi was too lucky. Therefore, this group of living ancestors began to nitpick after returning. In the past, everything was good, but now everything was not pleasing to the eye. However, these living ancestors still had a temper and refused to say what their children and grandchildren did not do well. In their minds, if the other family's granddaughter could think of it, could it be that they were made of wood and couldn't think of it? This made the children and grandchildren badly battered. Those who were truly filial repeatedly begged for mercy when they were lectured. As for those who were really just putting on an act, they were caught off guard and thought that they had exposed themselves. In a moment of carelessness, they panicked. This time, they really exposed themselves. Well, they didn't get the treatment they wanted for the time being. Instead, they exposed the true and false feelings first. Naturally, they were furious when they found out that they had spoiled an ingrate. Jingwan probably didn't expect that she had inadvertently cheated so many people. At the moment, Li Ruyu stammered for a long time and couldn't say anything. As for Commandery Prince Qing, his heart was like dead ashes after Madame Luo's words. After hearing Emperor Li's words, he was completely numb. Therefore, when Li Ruyu looked at her for help, she didn't respond at all. Ruyu, you don't need to look at your mother. His Majesty is asking you. You just need to tell him everything in detail. The Empress said lightly. She didn't speak harshly, but the women in the harem all knew that she had completely given up on Li Ruyu and didn't intend to help her at all. They thought in their hearts that she was really heartless. However, if they were in her shoes, they would also give up Li Ruyu without hesitation in the current situation. It was a pity that they couldn't use this matter to attack the Empress. However, the Empress had suffered a great loss today. Tears began to fall from Li Ruyu's eyes. In the harem, Lu Qingdi had seen a lot of women cry. They looked pitiful, pear blossoms in the rain, stubborn and aggrieved. Those were his women. When he had the intention, he would coax them. Li Ruyu was nothing. She was just his niece. Originally, he was busy with government affairs and had to solve these trivial matters. Moreover, there was Jingwan in front of him. Now that he saw Li Ruyu like this, he became more and more impatient. Enough. If you don't want to say it, I'll make you unable to say it in the future. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Li Ruyu repeated this sentence as she cried. And it was this sentence that seemed to convince herself. It's all that little bitch Luo Jingwan's fault. If it weren't for her, Brother Lin wouldn't dislike me. She stole the person I like. Why can't I steal her fiancé? The more she said, the more she felt that she was right. In the end, she even shouted loudly. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Madame Luo's face was livid. She only thought that Wan had embarrassed her. She didn't expect that it was such a groundless accusation. Wait, Ruyu, who is the Brother Lin you mentioned? Is there a fourth person involved in this matter? Your Majesty, Ruyu is talking about Yilin. The Empress dispelled Emperor Lu Qingdi's confusion. The Luo family's girl stole Yilin. What kind of nonsense is this? Your Majesty, Princess Ruyu is purely slandering. When I first entered the capital, I took my granddaughters to Duke Ding's manor as guests. Because Third Miss has been infatuated with flowers since she was a child, when she was talking about flowers with the young miss in Duke Ding's manor, Sun Bingbai accidentally overheard it. Hearing that Sun Bingbai was also someone who loved flowers and plants very much, he probably said a few words. At that time, Princess Ruyu wanted to beat and kill him, without the slightest bit of a girl's upbringing. Princess Ruyu insulted and hurt people first, so my granddaughter was angry and humiliated her. Because of similar matters, Princess Ruyu has laid her hands on quite a few young ladies. Sun Bingbai has long hated her actions to the core. On the spot, he declared that even if he became a monk, he would not take Princess Ruyu as his wife. However, Princess Ryu blamed this on my granddaughter. This is simply unreasonable. Madame Luo's sharp gaze stared at Li Ryu. A girl's reputation was greater than the heavens. How could she let others ruin it? Now that Madame Luo has mentioned it, this prince also remembers. Li Ryu, this prince seemed to have told you to stay in seclusion for 3 months to learn the rules. Jumping out so early, are you ignoring this prince's words? Li Hongyuan said in a somewhat cold voice. Li Ryu almost reflexively trembled and shrunk into a ball. TSK, look at you and you call yourself a princess. Li Hongyuan's tone was very cold and disdainful. Lu Qingdi glanced at his evil son. In fact, he still didn't understand. Why did this evil son come to join in the fun? However, in order to reduce the trouble in the future, he wanted Li Ryu to understand Qin Jingmin first. He also needed an excuse to put the blame on Li Ryu. In the end, this person was too smart. The person he sent changed his mind at the last minute to see if he could induce her to do it herself. Not only did she do it, but she also did it to the extreme. This result was really unexpected. Alright, Li Hongyuan only needed to send someone to see how things went. Princess Qing stared blankly at her dazed daughter. She actually gave birth to this idiot. Could it be that she was swapped after she was born? If she really had the courage to scheme against Sun Yilin, she might even praise her. Then, she would work hard to marry her back to Ding General Manor. But this idiot, Prince Cheng, was also in a mess. He wanted to dig a hole and bury himself. Qin Jingmin wiped his face helplessly. Qin Jingmin, Your Majesty, I was tricked by such an idiot. Does it mean that I am also hopelessly stupid? Lu Qingdi wanted to nod, but when he thought of Qin Jingmin's talent and the articles he wrote, there were not many smart people in the world if he was really an idiot. He coughed dryly. As the saying goes, people make mistakes and horses stumble. You probably didn't expect this to happen. It's pardonable that you were careless. But my cousin and I have broken off the engagement. A single mistake could lead to everlasting regret. How could Lu Qingdi not see that this guy was deeply in love with Miss Luo? So now, what do you think? Can I ask Your Majesty to kill Li Ryu? Can I ask Your Majesty to grant a marriage between my cousin and me? Qin Jingmin stared at Lu Qingdi. Lu Qingdi was speechless. Did he need to ask? He was not a child. Could he say something more reasonable? Li Hongyuan just thought that he would let bygones be bygones and let him go for the sake of marrying an idiot. But at this time, he still dared to covet his wife. If this could be tolerated, what else could be tolerated? No. Then I will marry her. Qin Jingmin said with an extremely indifferent expression. But everyone knew that Li Ryu would not have a good life after marrying him. An enemy who ruined a good marriage, how could you expect him to treat you well? There was no such good thing in his dreams. No, I don't want to marry him. No matter how slow Li Ryu was, she could feel Qin Jingmin's hatred for her. Even if she was a commandery princess, he had no respect for her. If she married him, she would end up miserable. Isn't it too late to say this now? Lu Qingdi said coldly. Why didn't you think about the consequences when you did such a shameless thing? If you don't want to marry, you can either become a monk or die suddenly. Qin Jingmin doesn't want to marry you. If you die, everything will be over. Li Ryu immediately shut her mouth. As the saying goes, a bad life is better than a good death. I've troubled you to come here today. As a member of the royal family, it's natural that this kind of thing happened to the royal family. However, Your Majesty has handled it properly, and we old guys don't need to say anything. Even though they were members of the royal family and had a lot of say in some aspects, they also had to know that it was better not to intervene in things that the emperor needed to deal with. If they dared to take advantage of their seniority, they would not have a good end. Originally, this matter should have been handled by the Empress, but it was Luo Peishan who brought it up, and he had not been idle these days. If people thought that Commandery Prince Qing was demoted only because his adopted daughter did not teach him well, they were very wrong. Many people wanted to push Commandery Prince Qing down. In addition to the fact that Commandery Prince Qing was not liked, it was also a factional struggle. On the surface, Commandery Prince Qing was the son-in-law of Ding General Manor, so he naturally belonged to the Empress's faction. Therefore, it was not appropriate for the Empress to deal with this matter, so Lu Qingdi made the decision to deal with it personally. Now that the fun was over, the concubines and members of the imperial clan could leave. As for the princes, it was their own business whether they wanted to find their mothers, deal with official business, or leave the palace to do their own business. As long as it did not affect the business, Lu Qingdi did not bother to pay attention to them. Madame Luo wanted to immediately take Jingwan out of the palace, but Lu Qingdi said that he wanted to talk to Jingwan. Therefore, Madame Luo stayed in the Kunyi Palace. When Lu Qingdi stepped out of the gate of the Kunyi Palace, Lu Qingdi suddenly stopped. "Empress, I don't want to see this kind of thing again." "Yes, Your Majesty." This kind of thing did not only happen in the Kunyi Palace. With Lu Qingdi's words, the Empress did not hesitate to rectify it. If others could dismiss her people, as the head of the harem, it was not difficult for her to dismiss people in other palaces. While Madame Luo was changing clothes, Prince Kong wanted to leave at this time, but the Empress stopped him. "My son, how about letting third Miss Luo be your step-princess? She is 14 this year and will be of marriageable age next year. At that time, you can remarry." Prince Kong was surprised. He originally wanted to say that the status of Luo's third young lady was a bit low, but on second thought, even if he wanted to marry a noble lady, there was no suitable one now. Besides, it was only a second Wang Fei, so it should be better if her status was lower. Another advantage was that the threat to the legitimate son left behind by the first wife was relatively low. Most importantly, how could he say no to what his Empress mother had decided? "It's fine as long as mother decides." The Empress looked at him indifferently. "I know what you are thinking. You dislike her status, but she may not like you. Don't think that all the girls in the world will yearn for the royal family. What's more, we are not the only ones who have eyes on this girl. Although her status is low, there are a lot of young masters of equal social status for her to choose." From Chen Jingmin, it can be seen that the Luo family doesn't choose her husband based on social status. Besides, because of what happened in Great Elder Princess's mansion, her social status has doubled. You also saw the situation in the palace examination today. Your father praised her highly, and there are many noble families who want to marry her. It's not easy for her to be your step-princess. Then, what should we do now? Mother, please tell me. Before seeing this girl, I actually want Yilin to marry her. After seeing her, maybe she is more suitable to be your princess. Putting aside her family background, this girl is definitely more presentable than your previous consort. Prince Kong did not expect his mother to think so highly of third Miss Luo, but he believed in his mother's judgment. She rarely misjudged. Mother, after seeing her, Lady Su will not give up easily. What's more, Yijia has married into the Luo family. They will naturally want to capture this girl. Lady Su does not have a suitable son, but her maternal family does. Her cousin is the right commander-in-chief, and she has a son who is also very outstanding. Now, we can't do anything, so we will wait and see. After all, the Luo clan's attitude towards this matter is also very important. You have to know that unless your imperial father decrees the marriage, the Luo clan has the possibility of rejecting the marriage. But in fact, your imperial father also knows that this young lady is involved in a lot of things. It's already good that he can sit by and not help either side. While old Madame Luo is still in Kunyi Palace, I will sound her out later. At this time, go to your father's place. If the other brothers are not here, you can go do your own things. If one of them is here, you can stay. Therefore, in order to maximize the benefits for people like them, not to mention the matter of changing relatives, they could even change a few more people. Yes, mother. Prince Kong was about to leave when he remembered something. Mother, the chief steward in your palace. What, my son, do you think I only have one available chief steward? This son is overthinking. This son will take his leave. It's only one chief steward. Without one, I can still bring up 8 or 10 more. The Empress was quite indifferent to this point. If one person could really affect the overall situation of her Kunyi palace, then she could not continue to be the Empress. When noble consort Su brought her 2 sons to Jade Essence Palace, she was also talking to them about Jingwan's marriage. As the Empress guessed, noble consort Su's first choice was her cousin's son. The Empress's first choice was son Yilin. Now, I'm afraid the Empress prefers third Miss Luo to be her daughter-in-law. Therefore, the women in the harem were not much different from each other. Li Hongyuan seemed to be listening casually, but in his heart, a storm was gathering in his eyes. Although he knew that Wan would be spied on and schemed against if she broke off the engagement, he couldn't help but be furious when he heard these people betrothing Wan to this person and that person without considering her own thoughts, let alone her happiness. Although these things, whether they considered or not, Wan could only belong to him in the end. However, whether they considered or not affected Li Hongyuan's perception of them. If they considered her when they schemed against Wan, then when he dealt with them, he might be gentler. Yuan, what are you thinking about? Noble consort Su suddenly turned to look at Li Hongyuan as she spoke. I'm bored. I also think that you've been really bored recently. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to the palace today. Li Hongyuan faintly hummed in acknowledgement. When he heard how Wan asked Luo Jingbua to guard against other women, he knew that Wan was very disgusted with those people and those things. He felt that even if he was just putting on a show, he should try his best to reduce the number of people in the courtyard. Although he didn't mind Wan settling accounts with him in the future, those people might delay the time when he won Wan's heart. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that since he learned that Wan was going to the capital, he hadn't played 7 Days of Love. It turned out that he didn't need to reflect deeply on himself and subconsciously restrained himself. When did he, Li Hongyuan, become so obedient? Very good, he found another reason for Wan to compensate him. Yuan, how about letting third Miss Luo be your princess consort? Noble consort Su said with a smile. Mother. Li Hongming subconsciously wanted to stop her. This matter couldn't be done like this. Noble consort Su glanced at him, and Li Hongming could only shut his mouth. Li Hongyuan didn't react. Mother, do you want to become enemies with Luo Shangshu? It mainly depends on whether you like it or not, Yuan. Everything else doesn't matter. It's just that this girl's status is still a bit low. If her father sits in the position of a 4th-rank official, then let Luo Shangshu retire early and promote her father, everything will be fine. Unfortunately. However, she can still be your consort. In front of the throne, this son's everything is not important. The most important thing is to win the support of the courtiers. The implication was that he should shut up and not make such meaningless jokes. He only needed to wait for his father to take the initiative to grant him and Wan's marriage. Before that, he only needed to clear the obstacles for himself and Wan, then clear them. See, it was just a matter of a sentence. How simple. Simple. Damn, there were too many people watching Wan. It would be very tiring to deal with them one by one. It wasn't simple at all. Wan's current situation was much more complicated than in his previous life. At that time, he didn't know the specifics, but at most, the Qin family would break off the engagement in 2 days. Princess Qin Jingmin still had some say, but she was unknown. It was only a month later that she was suddenly schemed against and set up a second fiancé. Then, she got married not long after she became of age, and it was when the man was in mourning. However, she didn't have to wait for another 3 years. Speaking of which, at that time, the Luo family actually wanted her to wait for 3 more years, right? Why did they let her get married at that time? There must be a reason behind it. Unfortunately, Li Hongyuan basically didn't know about Wan at that time and didn't pay attention to her at all. How could he know the reason? Old Madame Luo's words indeed have an impact on Yuan, right? Noble consort Su sighed softly. Li Hongyuan frowned slightly and looked at noble consort Su. Imperial Mother is thinking too much. It's not like I can't feel how Imperial Mother treats me. There's no need for Imperial Mother to use this method to prove anything. Imperial Mother first wants the best for you. Everything else can be considered later. Li Hongyuan glanced at Li Hongming. Sacrificing the interests of your own son to fulfill the love of your adopted son. It's no wonder your biological son always thinks that you're biased towards your adopted son. You've already done those 2 things. What's the point of doing these things to this extent? Imperial Mother, you don't have to worry about me. Noble consort Su smiled. That's right, Imperial Mother heard that you asked for a secret skin-nourishing recipe from the Luo family's 3rd young miss and prepared to give it to Imperial Mother. Imperial Mother has been waiting, but I haven't seen it until today. I forgot. Li Hongyuan said indifferently. Noble consort Su covered her mouth and laughed because she felt her son's awkwardness. That Luo family's 3rd young miss is really too much. If you didn't ask her for it, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to give it to you. She took the initiative to give it to me. Does she still want her reputation? All right, remember to give it to Imperial Mother to try. Imperial Mother sees that Luo family's 3rd young Mrs. Skin is so good that I have nothing to say. I know. Li Hongyuan was a bit impatient. Women are troublesome. Little brat, what are you saying? Noble consort Su raised her hand and patted him. Li Hongyuan frowned and resisted the urge to avoid it. Seeing that her son was really annoyed, noble consort Su refused to let him go. Imperial Mother looks, Yuan's skin is also good. As a man, your skin is a bit darker. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to escape being a natural beauty. Li Hongyuan's face darkened. Imperial Mother, that's enough. Noble consort Su couldn't help but laugh. Li Hongming looked at the 2 of them joking intimately as if there was no one else around. And he was like an outsider. If there was someone who didn't know, who would think that he was noble consort Su's biological son? He clearly knew that the reason for these things was that Imperial Mother had strict requirements for him to be the heir apparent, but she was truly raising Li Hongyuan as her son. But he still couldn't help but feel jealous. Li Hongyuan had taken all of Imperial Father's indulgence and doting, and Imperial Mother's care and love. Even if Imperial Mother had promised him that Imperial Father would pass the throne to anyone but Li Hongyuan, what could he do? He had received too much, so much that it was unbearable. He had to wait until Imperial Father passed away to clean up. But other than enduring, he could only endure. Li Hongming's throat moved, swallowing down the bitterness and unwillingness. Li Hongyuan didn't need to look to understand. He sneered in his heart. Noble consort, His Majesty had people send Luo family's 3rd young miss out of the palace. He also sent people to Kunyi Palace to pick up old Madame Luo. Noble consort Su was surprised. So fast. It seems that there's an emergency. I see. If it was an emergency, then it was no wonder. When it came to emergency, everything else had to be put aside. His Majesty actually directly sent her out of the palace. It seems that he doesn't want to leave her in the harem for us to meet alone. What do you think His Majesty means? Could it be that he had some thoughts? Imperial mother, imperial father wouldn't be so out of line. Li Hongyuan interrupted her. If he really had such thoughts, even if it was his father, Li Hongyuan, he wouldn't be able to avoid committing regicide and killing his father. Anyone who tried to snatch her away from him, no matter who they were, would become his enemy and be killed without mercy. All right. After all, this girl isn't the daughter of a local official. Your imperial father hasn't held a draft for many years. The young and beautiful girls in the harem were basically sent here by the local officials. Noble consort Su said with a cold smile. That's why I say that women are troublesome. Your patience with women can never exceed 7 days. Aken will leave first. Li Hongyuan impatiently turned and left. I'll go get the secret recipe for you. Imperial consort Su smiled. Her son probably didn't have much patience for the same woman. However, as his mother, she had always been an exception. Chapter 111. Li Hongyuan saw that Jing Wan was obviously speechless at him, but she still answered him seriously. Her expression was really. What should he do? It was as if he wanted to hug her, kiss her, and rub her. His fingers twitched, but he controlled himself and didn't really reach out. This fragrant and fatty meat was right in front of his eyes. When would he be able to eat it openly? The current situation was a bit complicated. Compared with his plan, there was a slight deviation. However, it hadn't reached the point of losing control. He wasn't sure when he could take her down. It wasn't good to be unknown. It was too attractive. It seemed. Well, he still preferred to see the radiant Wan. As for the wolves, if there were one, he would kill them. If there were two, he would kill a pair. Wan, what was with this anxious and worried voice? It sounded like he would eat her granddaughter. He really wanted to eat her. Jingwan turned her head and saw her grandmother coming down from the palanquin. The one who came down from the other palanquin was actually her grandfather. Didn't they say that there was an urgent government affair? Grandfather couldn't be needed, but he was a first-rank minister. He should be able to listen in. Madame Luo quickly stepped forward, pulled Jingwan, and subconsciously pulled her behind her. Then she saw Li Hongyuan's dark face and realized that she had overreacted. However, what was done had been done. Greetings, Your Highness. Forget it. Li Hongyuan's body was overflowing with hostility. His eyes were dark. Even if I am a wolf, tiger, or leopard, I still have a sense of propriety. Madame Luo, you don't have to be so guarded against me. You know what kind of reputation Your Highness has. What I am guarding against is not you, but those rumors. Li Hongyuan's face was extremely dark, but this person was an elderly person and Wan's grandmother, so he really couldn't do anything to her. Instead, he took out his anger on Luo Peishan, who was slowly walking over, and left in a huff. Jingwan stood behind her grandmother and actually felt very happy. Putting aside that her grandmother did not yield an inch to protect her, the main reason was that Jin Qinhuang's temper was not as bad as the rumors said. At the very least, he still respected the elderly. Seeing Li Hongyuan get on Jin Qinhuang Fu's carriage, old Madame Luo slightly breathed a sigh of relief. When facing Jin Qinhuang, although she appeared unyielding on the surface, her heart was actually quite nervous and apprehensive. She was afraid that he would do something to her, but the main thing was that she was worried about really arousing his anger. If he really did something to Wan, that would really be a matter of life and death. Madam, you don't have to do that. Luo Peishan walked in. These people actually saw it the clearest. If Jin Qinhuang's bad reputation outside was 12 points, in reality, it was only 7 or 8 points at most. Old Madame Luo looked at him with dissatisfaction. Is this what this concubine is worried about? I am worried about being seen. All right. Once the third young lady was involved, he would have to stand aside beside his old wife. Luo Peishan also felt that he was in the wrong. He silently stroked his beard and looked at Jingwan. Why did Jin Qinhuang look for you? The matter of the secret skin nourishing recipe. Luo Peishan nodded. At that time, he was also present, so naturally, there was no need to ask. Let you give the recipe to him? No, probably because he found it troublesome. Jin Qinhuang let his granddaughter directly open a shop and buy the finished product for him. And this is also good. If Jin Qinhuang spends money to buy it, I believe that other people will not reach out for it. Third girl, you don't have to suffer a loss. But there is one thing that is not so good. If something goes wrong in the middle, third girl, the responsibility you bear is too big. The harem is originally a place of trouble, and there is not a single day of peace. Opening a shop is also not a simple matter. I have never done this before. The most troublesome thing is that it is hard to find a master who can make the rouge and powder. Moreover, one uses flowers and plants, and also needs to be planted in a large area. I'm afraid that this will not be done in a short time. Old Madame Luo followed up. Grandfather and grandmother don't need to worry. In fact, I have already thought about it. It will be fine as long as we transfer all the responsibility. Luo Peishan's eyes lit up, and old Madame Luo more or less understood Jingwan's meaning. Wan, you mean, when I go back and make some finished products, I will write down the recipe. Then I will go to Rouge Pavilion. What kind of place was Rouge Pavilion? Even Luo Peishan, a big man, knew about it. Just from the name alone, one would know that it was a place that specialized in selling rouge and powder. There were shops in all the big and small cities in the entire Qi Yuan dynasty, and even in the surrounding countries. The concubines in the harem, except for some of their own secret recipes, all use rouge and powder from Rouge Pavilion. It could be said that Rouge Pavilion was really famous all over the world. Jingwan cooperated with Rouge Pavilion, so it could be said that even if something went wrong, she would have no responsibility at all. She did not have to worry about the workers, the flower fields, or anything else. The only thing she had to do was to come up with the recipe and then sit back and collect the profits. Our third girl is so smart. You came up with a solution so quickly. Jingwan smiled. Grandfather, you flatter me. In fact, I had this plan for a long time, but I didn't find the time. Now, the timing is just right. You are really not polite. She wasn't his biological daughter, so it was good enough that she put in half of her effort. To find someone who was good in all aspects was a stroke of luck. It was also his third daughter's luck that she should have such a person by her side. There was a battle at the border, but it shouldn't be serious. Grandfather couldn't play any role in it, so he took the initiative to ask the emperor to leave early. The emperor let Min Gear stay. Luo Peishan suddenly said. When Luo Peishan told her this, Jingwan wasn't surprised. That's cousin Min's good fortune. Is the girl unwilling? Unwilling? No, there's nothing to be unwilling about, and there's nothing to be unwilling about. Even if cousin Min has a bright future, and I'm poor and miserable. If it's not meant to be, then don't force it. If you insist on what doesn't belong to you, then you're just asking for trouble. If there's anything bad about you, girl, it's that you're too rational and think too thoroughly. If you don't try to ask for some things, how do you know that it's not meant to be in your life? Grandfather's words are right, but your granddaughter's nature is lazy. I don't want to ask for things that slip away from my hands. Grandfather, you should think this way. If it's gone this time, maybe there will be something better that will come to you. That's reasonable. If you're really poor and miserable in the future, then the heavens are really unfair. Grandfather, don't say that. The heavens can't control so many people. Moreover, it's possible that people's fate isn't controlled by others at all. If everyone's fate isn't good and they blame the heavens, then how innocent is the heavens? Luo Peishan laughed heartily. You're a girl with a pile of logic. Grandfather can't win against you. I'm just speaking the truth. Fine, fine, fine. Grandfather won't argue with you. That's right, girl, when grandfather was still in Qi and Fu, weren't you always by your grandmother's side? Why didn't grandfather see you more than a few times? Jingwan stared at him with a "you don't even know the reason" expression, causing Luo Peishan to think that he had become stupid. Slightly annoyed, he bent his finger and knocked on Jingwan's head. Jingwan covered her head and pursed her lips, looking at Luo Peishan with an aggrieved expression. Luo Peishan thought that he had hurt her and was somewhat regretful. Girl, my good granddaughter, does it really hurt? Grandfather wants to take a look. Jingwan giggled as she dodged. No, no. I'm just playing with you. But grandfather, you can't hit me next time. Alright, I won't hit you. Grandfather isn't as smart as our family's Wan Wan. Wan Wan, tell grandfather the reason. Granddaughter was just thinking that grandmother should want grandfather to accompany her more. When you're around, all the other irrelevant people should naturally disappear. Don't you think so? Jingwan blinked. How old were you at that time? How could you think of such things? Luo Peishan looked incredulous. Granddaughter couldn't think of it, but didn't our second branch have a ready-made one? My mother couldn't wait to stick to my father all day long. If my father didn't go out on a day, she would definitely send me away early. Jingwan didn't blush at all when she pushed the blame to her mother. Besides, she wasn't lying. Her mother had really done such things before, and it wasn't just once or twice. That's why granddaughter thought that grandmother must be the same. Luo Peishan's old face was both red and black. He was red because he didn't even realize that such a young granddaughter could think of such things. He was black because those two bastards, they didn't care about you when you were so young. They only knew how to be lovey-dovey all day long. Fortunately, you were a director. Otherwise, you would have been led astray by them. Jingwan thought that she had to be sensible. She wasn't really a child at that time and didn't want to be blinded by her parents. She couldn't make a scene, roll around, and refuse to leave as a third wheel. Even if she was a daughter, it was still annoying. Jingwan hurriedly smoothed her angry grandfather's hair and diverted Luo Peishan's attention. However, Jingwan was even a little gloating when she saw that her grandfather was going to hold a grudge against her father. She was afraid that it would have nothing to do with her father anymore. At that time, she also suffered a lot of psychological damage. Those 2 days were spent in front of flowers and under the moonlight. She was lonely at a young age and had no one to accompany her. Luo Jingyu was also born, but even if she could barely overcome her dislike of her stepsister, she did not want to play with real children all the time. Occasionally, they could be considered teasing, but often, they would play together and cause her to break down. Therefore, now that her father was going to be punished by her grandfather, she couldn't be blamed for being unkind. Along the way, they talked and laughed. Putting aside the unhappiness, Luo Peishan felt particularly comfortable. She was really a considerate little cotton-padded jacket. Madame Luo could hear Luo Peishan's laughter in the carriage behind them and smiled unconsciously. However, when she thought of the Empress's intention, the smile on her face faded and her eyes were covered with haze. If Emperor Luqingdi didn't send people, she was afraid that she didn't know how to deal with the Empress. Why couldn't those people be more peaceful? Why did they have to use anyone who was beneficial to them as a pawn? Couldn't they have a little bit of humanity? Thinking of this, Madame Luo laughed at herself. Did she expect those people to have a little bit of humanity? She was really old and confused. Back at the Luo family, Jingwan went back to her small courtyard. Luo Peishan didn't go to the front study, but followed Madame Luo to the backyard. Obviously, he had something to say to Madame Luo. Obviously, Madame Luo also thought of the same thing. So, what they wanted to talk about was actually very clear. Quickly find another person like Qin Jingmin and get engaged. Obviously, this was unrealistic. Maybe it would anger those concubines and princes. After all, Qin Jingmin's situation was different from the one that was hastily decided. The former was already decided in advance. It wouldn't make people angry, but it would only make people feel pity. The latter was obviously done deliberately to stop them. It was so obvious that they disliked them. Were they looking for death or seeking death? Maybe they would do something unreasonable. Whether it was for Jingwan, for the Luo family, or to not implicate the innocent, Jingwan's marriage couldn't be decided easily, let alone at will. However, to let Jingwan's marriage become another competition between those people. Whoever won would have the final say. Madame Luo was extremely angry, and Luo Peishan wasn't any better. However, they were powerless. Their thin arms couldn't break the other party's thick legs. Fortunately, it was Jingwan. She did what she was supposed to do. If it was another person, who knows how many times she would cry. Jingwan was in a good mood. She was preparing the things to take to Rouge Pavilion. There were still some things that she had finished before, and there were also a lot of semi-finished products. Now, it didn't take too much time. She could go to Rouge Pavilion tomorrow. When Jingwan was done, her wet nurse brought 2 servant girls to see her. She said that they were bought not long ago and added 2 more servants to Jingwan's place. Now, these 2 were just brought for Jingwan to take a look. If she wasn't satisfied, they would be sent elsewhere and replaced with someone else. The 2 maidservants were a pair of beautiful twin sisters. They looked very similar, but one of them was fairer while the other was darker. Their skin was darker than most people's. Moreover, it was obvious that they were not tanned. They were naturally tanned, because whether it was their necks or their hands, the color was very uniform. As for their faces, it was not worth mentioning. These 2 people should be fraternal twins. In fact, when Jingwan's wet nurse was called to pick servants, she only picked the fairer one. She didn't want the darker one at first, but the 2 sisters begged the wet nurse, and the wet nurse brought her back for her young lady to take a look. When the darker servant girl saw Jingwan looking at her, she shrank back uncomfortably. She knew that she was dark and not very likable, but if the young lady couldn't keep her, she wouldn't have a good time. After all, they were deliberately sent to the Luo family to serve the Luo family's 3rd young lady. Young lady, don't drive this servant away. Although this servant is a little ugly, this servant is very capable. This servant can do anything you want, Jingwan laughed. I didn't say I wanted to drive you away. Besides, even if you're a little dark, you're still a little beauty. It was just that her clothes were a little too horrible to look at. In the Qi Yuan dynasty, white was the most beautiful thing. This dark girl also tried to make herself look fairer. She used a lot of powder and put on some rouge. Jingwan wanted to cover her eyes. Her clothes didn't match her skin and naturally made her look dark and ugly. In fact, her facial features were the same as her sister's. She was just a little fairer and looked beautiful. How could she be ugly? Perhaps it was the first time that the girl heard someone call her a beauty. She wasn't sure whether Jingwan was mocking her or thinking that she was beautiful. She looked very helpless. Young lady, don't laugh at this servant. Why would I laugh at you? Go and wash your face. In a while, I'll teach you how to put on makeup that suits you. I guarantee that you'll be as beautiful as your sister. Young lady, are you telling the truth? The other servant girls covered their mouths and laughed. The most lively one, Ching-ju, directly pulled her hand. Young lady has never lied. Let's go, I'll take you to wash your face. After the two of them left, the fairer girl directly knelt down and kowtowed to Jingwan. Thank you, young lady. Quickly get up. Then, Jingwan asked about the origin of the two, because Jingwan saw that the hands of the two sisters were somewhat different from the hands of ordinary girls. The calluses were thicker and the knuckles were thicker. It turned out that the two sisters were born in a hunter's family. They learned martial arts and hunting from their father when they were young, especially the black sister, who was very skilled in martial arts. Her archery skills could be said to be 100% accurate. However, later on, the family met with a disaster and the two sisters were forced to flee. Because the two of them were skilled in martial arts, they were able to move to the capital with the refugees. However, they didn't have a household registration and were also girls. They couldn't find a place to stay and couldn't work as helpers, so they had no choice but to sell themselves as slaves. However, they didn't meet any black-hearted human traffickers. It was just that the two of them were only good at martial arts and strength, but they weren't good at anything else. In addition, the black sister wasn't likable, and the white sister didn't want to be separated from her sister. In these 3 years, not to mention other things, there was no problem with this rule at all. Moreover, although the white sister was only 15 years old, she was very calm and her temperament was more similar to that of Qingju. In fact, when Jingwan saw the white sister, she knew the reason why the wet nurse chose her. Qingju was already 17 years old, so it was basically impossible for her to get married with Jingwan. Therefore, it was more convenient to choose a girl with a similar temperament to Jingwan. Then in the future, they can stay here with me. First, take the salary of a second-class maid. The wet nurse will arrange for them to take the money directly from me. First, make some clothes. White sister will be called Bai Xiao in the future. Black sister will still be the same name. I don't need to care about the white sister's clothes, mainly the black sister's clothes. Choose dark purple, gray-green, brownish-red, brownish-yellow and other colors. I don't want light and soft colors. The embroidery on the clothes should be simple and matched with warmer colors. That's all. The people around Jingwan would not question Jingwan's words. Although Bai Xiao muttered in her heart that her sister would look old-fashioned in those colors, this was the master's absolute order, so they only needed to obey. After washing off the things on her face, the black sister looked much more pleasing to the eye. Jingwan wanted to put makeup on her, which was not appropriate, but other people did not know how to put makeup on people with dark skin. Jingwan was a little itchy to do it. However, Jingwan could not use the things that she usually used, otherwise Nanny Gong would really scold her. However, Jingwan was never a stingy master, so the things that her maids used were absolutely not bad. The black sister's skin was not bad. Besides, as a 15-year-old girl, it was at least 30% worse. Jingwan carefully put makeup on her. She threw away all the rouge and finally asked Qing Mei to comb her hair again. The new black sister looked like a completely different person. Her face was still the same black face, but she looked radiant, lively and had another kind of indescribable beauty. Nanny Gong's eyes were the sharpest. At a glance, she could see that the black sister now had something that was very attractive to men, but she did not know how to describe it. If she asked, Jingwan would tell her that it was vitality, beauty and the release of the true wildness. Yes, the black sister was born as a prey. She was skilled in martial arts, so she was different from ordinary girls. Once she released it, it would arouse men's desire to conquer her. Jingwan said that the black sister was still young. When she put makeup on her, she had tried to restrain herself as much as possible. In a few years, when she was fully grown, she would be really charming. When she was at home, she did not pay much attention to it. After she came to the capital city, she was criticized again and again. The black sister began to care about her face and her skin color. She envied her sister's fair and beautiful skin and even gradually became a little self-abased. She was silent, and she was not as reckless as she used to be in the forest. Later, when she was training, she did not care about her life. Seeing this, Bai Xiao's heart ached. In fact, her sister was not ugly at all. She just did not find the right way before. Seeing that everyone was staring at her, the black sister was a little nervous. What's wrong? Jingwan smiled. Go and get the glass mirror. It was the first time that the black sister used a mirror that could reflect people so clearly. Looking at herself in the mirror, she could not believe it. Is this really me? After getting the confirmation again and again, the black sister was so happy that she was about to kneel down and kowtow to Jingwan. Jingwan pulled her and smiled. I didn't do anything. I just restored a little beauty. The black sister was not an inferior and timid girl. The problem that she was originally concerned about disappeared in an instant. Her whole person was glowing with vitality and even showed signs of returning to her original nature of running in the forest. Her whole person was in high spirits. When her spirit came back, she was naturally more dazzling. If the wet nurse had not been looking at her all the time, she would never have believed that this was the girl she had brought back. But she still clicked her tongue in amazement. If you walk out, those people will definitely not recognize you. But if we say that our girl is amazing, others don't have this ability. The others nodded in agreement. Well, go and do your work. That night, Nanny Gong told Jingwan that in the future, at least one of Bai Xiao and the black sister should be with her when she went out, or she should not leave her side. Jingwan also knew that Nanny Gong had been blaming herself because of what happened in White Dragon Temple. She blamed her for not protecting her well and was even a little frightened. Now there were two more girls who knew martial arts, which was probably just what she wanted. However, in less than half a day, Nanny Gong was relieved to let them protect her. Did she trust these two girls so much? Jingwan agreed. The next day, when paying respects to Madame Luo, Jingwan took the black sister, a unique beauty, out to show off. When this group of people was bought, Madame Luo had seen them once. Because the black sister was very unique, she naturally noticed her. However, she did not look like a crafty girl. Since she had already entered the mansion, she should keep her. But she did not expect that when they met again, she was not only in the third girl's courtyard, but also completely changed. She is a good girl. In the future, she will serve your girl with all her heart. Don't worry, Madame Luo. I will serve you well. Madame Luo nodded again. She had been taught the rules well. She also asked Madame Luo about going out, and naturally, she agreed. Jingwan knew that Luo Jingying had been looking at her, but she did not say anything. It could be seen that she would not make trouble for the time being. When they went out, Jingwan was going to choose two of the four maids. However, Qing Zhu took the initiative to ask Bai Xiao to replace her. It seemed that she also understood the meaning of Bai Xiao's existence. Jingwan did not object. The Rouge Pavilion was located in the most prosperous area of the East District. Although there was no obvious distinction between the wealthy and the commoners in the capital, most of the valuable things were still concentrated in the East District. Most of the people who came in and out of the Rouge Pavilion were dressed in luxurious clothes. The curtain was lifted a little, and Jingwan looked at the bustling scene outside. There were many people like Jingwan coming and going, so she did not have to worry too much. Young lady, we have arrived at Rouge Pavilion. Jingwan alighted from the horse carriage. No matter what, there were fewer people entering Rouge Pavilion than she expected. Wasn't it famous? Perhaps Nanny Gong saw Jingwan's confusion, so she explained, "Young lady, there are several Rouge Pavilions in the capital city. The things in this place are the most expensive and the best. Rouge Pavilion has been around for so many years, so basically everyone knows what is in it. Basically, everyone has something they are used to. When they run out of things, they can just ask the servants to come and buy more. There is no point in staying there, so after a long time, it has become like this." Upon closer inspection, it was true that many of the well-dressed and exquisitely dressed girls were actually servant girls. Most of them came and went in and out alone. Jingwan and the others entered the store. The store was filled with dazzling items. There were actually quite a number of people buying things. Just as Granny Gong had said, if they wanted anything, they just had to say it. The waitresses in the store would take the things for them. They paid and left. Basically, no one stayed. The waitresses in this shop were naturally very perceptive. When they saw Jingwan and the others, they could tell that they were new customers. Hence, a waitress came up to them with a smile. "Young lady, how may I help you?" "I am looking for your shopkeeper," Jingwan said bluntly. The waitress was slightly taken aback. "Young lady, please wait for a moment." She asked another waitress to go upstairs, while she led Jingwan and the others to a place inside. Jingwan did not expect that there would be an elegant little compartment here. Through this little compartment, Jingwan knew that the person who decorated this place was very interesting and tasteful. Jingwan looked at the things on display in the treasure pavilion. They were not expensive, but each one was very exquisite and had their own uniqueness. It seems that third young lady Luo likes the things here. Jingwan turned around and saw a middle-aged woman. She obviously had the dignified temperament of a noblewoman, but the way she dressed was dusty. Of course, this was only the opinion of Nanny Gong and the others. In Jingwan's eyes, she did not feel that way. She just wore a little thinner, and her clothes were a little tighter. Furthermore, her figure was a little better. She was not particularly beautiful, and there was a red mole below the corner of her right eye. It was not big, but it was so red that it seemed like it was going to drip blood. This was a very charming woman. Not to mention when she was young, even now, she was very popular among men. "Madam, do you know me?" The woman laughed and trembled with laughter. "Oh, it's the first time that someone called me madam. You can call me Yunyang. That's what others call me. I was also there on the birthday of Great Elder Princess." Jingwan nodded. "Yunyang, are you the shopkeeper here?" "No, but Rouge Pavilion is mine," Yunyang said with a smile. "Oh, it seems that I came at the right time today." Yunyang's smile deepened. Few people were not surprised to know that she was the owner of Rouge Pavilion, especially a little girl who was born in the backyard of a mansion. However, it was also possible that she had limited knowledge and did not know what Rouge Pavilion meant. However, judging from her performance in Great Elder Princess's mansion, she did not seem to be a short-sighted person. "Miss, please sit down." Then, she asked the waitress to serve Jingwan tea. "Miss, you came to see the shopkeeper as soon as you came here. What's the matter?" At Jingwan's signal, Bai Xiao put the wooden box in her arms on the table and opened it. "These are some things I often use. Yunyang, can you take a look?" Yunyang narrowed her eyes slightly. She had basically known the purpose of Jingwan's visit. No need to look at them. "I can look at you." She took out a flat jade bottle and tried to open the lid, but failed. Qinglan stepped forward, twisted the lid twice, and opened it. Yunyang stroked the two threads on the edge of the jade bottle and said, "What a delicate idea." Then, she dipped her finger in some milky white lipstick and gently rubbed it on the back of her hand. There was a faint camellia fragrance. Then, she looked at Jingwan's face and hands and said, "No wonder you dare to bring these things to Rouge Pavilion. So, what do you think, Yun-yang? It's such a good thing. If I refuse it, I may regret it for the rest of my life." Yun-yang took out a box of various skincare products. The paper under the box was the real treasure. "I want 30% of the profits of all the recipes I give, and I don't care about the rest." Yun-yang sighed helplessly and said, "You're really free and easy to leave everything to others." "That's because I'm afraid of trouble. Otherwise, 2 years ago, your Rouge Pavilion might have a difficult opponent." "That's really lucky." Although she said so, Jingwan could feel that she didn't take it seriously. After all, how could she, a woman, keep the Rouge Pavilion as a money tree without any support? "I have a little suggestion. Yun-yang, you can listen to it. Of course, if you're willing to accept it, you can accept it. If not, just ignore it." Third Miss Luo's suggestion to Great Elder Princess caused such a sensation. "I think it's definitely not a wise decision to ignore it." "You're flattering me, Yun-yang. Jingwan just talked about the packaging. There was no need for publicity at all. After all, Rouge Pavilion was so famous. Fine packaging was definitely a great way to increase the value of goods. When the quality was improved, the value of the goods might soar 10 or even 100 times. Wooden boxes, silver boxes, gold boxes, jade boxes, and those inlaid with gems. Wooden boxes can also be made of different kinds of wood, and then they can be packaged in a set of several kinds. As for the packaging of a single item, there can be a relatively common box, and naturally, there can also be a special box that belongs to a certain person. Yun-yang's eyes were full of splendor. She looked at Jingwan with disbelief. "Little girl, you're really amazing. If I let you do anything, I'm afraid your companions won't have anything to eat. You're exaggerating. I can only come up with some ideas. In fact, I know nothing about it." Yun-yang shook her head with a smile and then went to write the contract, 40% of the profits. "Yun-yang, it's too much." "It's not much. The value of your ideas is far more than the 10% profits. Although I'm a businesswoman, sometimes, I just want to do what I want. Then it would be impolite to refuse." "Then, Luo Sangunyang, do you have any other requests? For example, if your family comes to buy, I'll charge you 10% of the selling price. However, everyone has a monthly quota. The excess will be the original price. I can't let Yun-yang suffer a loss. Oh, by the way, if my family's fourth sister comes to buy, you can raise the price a bit." Even if she took out the money, Luo Jingying wouldn't be able to afford it. As for whether Luo Jingying would rob other people, it was none of Jingwan's business. After all, except for Yun-yang's, Luo Jingqiang's things were not easy to rob. However, Yun-yang didn't have much money. Would she be willing to give all of her share to Luo Jingying? Hee hee. Chapter 112. Don't say that Jingwan was black-hearted and set such a high price for the things she took out. From the beginning, her things could not be sold as commoners. How could you try to sell things that were sent into the palace as commoners? In this way, she might as well set the price as high as possible. No matter where it was, there was a mentality that the higher the price, the better the item. The more unique it was, the more it could stand out from the masses. This often meant that it had an extraordinary status. Many people also enjoyed the unique sense of superiority of, "I have something that you don't have." If they pushed it out in this way, there was no need to worry that no one would buy it. As for those who did not have the money but wanted to pretend to be rich, let's set up a system. There are some things that cannot be sold even if you have the money. This shouldn't be difficult for Yunyang, right? After all, Rouge Pavilion has been in the capital for so long. You must know the background of those madams and ladies. As for how to set the threshold, Yunyang should know better than me. Yunyang smiled charmingly. Miss is really kind. There is no need to be so polite to those vain people who overestimate themselves. Even if they lose their family fortune, it is because they asked for it. Rouge Pavilion's original items may be inferior to Mrs., but they are still good things. However, even if they are the best, they may not be suitable for everyone. Some people simply do not understand that the most suitable for them should be the best, but they choose the most expensive ones. Not only is it a waste of money, it may also cause them to suffer. In the end, they will blame it on Rouge Pavilion. This servant is too lazy to care about them. In a place like the capital, there were as many officials and nobles as dogs. There were too many people who could not be offended. Yunyang dared to speak so arrogantly. Her backing was probably not small. It must be said that the strongest backing was none other than the person who was in charge of the world. Yunyang was a middle-aged woman, but she was still charming. She was even more charming than many young ladies. Could it be that she was a Luchingdi who had some unclear first, second, third, and so on? For a moment, her imagination ran wild. Yunyang saw that Jingwan was looking at her in a daze. She touched her face and revealed a particularly charming smile. Could it be that this servant is especially beautiful today, and even Miss has been charmed? Jingwan, who was being teased, didn't have the slightest self-awareness. She smiled in all seriousness. Yes, Yunyang is indeed very charming. One had to know that sincere compliments from the same gender were often more pleasing than compliments from the opposite gender. Obviously, Yunyang was really pleased by Jingwan, and once again, she laughed until she was trembling. You are such a lovely girl. No wonder great elder princess, who doesn't like to get involved in other people's affairs, likes you so much. Yunyang is flattering me. Jingwan became more and more interested in Yunyang's origin. Because Yunyang urged her to stay, Jingwan stayed in the Rouge Pavilion for a while longer. The tea and snacks were very good. During the period, they also talked about a lot of other things. Then, Jingwan found that Yunyang was actually a talented woman. She knew history, was good at poetry and music, and was also very good at painting and calligraphy. The paintings on the wall in the compartment were the best proof. When Jingwan was looking at the wall, Yunyang was really looking at Jingwan. It's good to be young. After all, I'm old. No matter how much I raise you, you can't be so tender. In the future, any man who marries you will be really lucky. Yunyang smiled meaningfully. Jingwan pretended that she didn't understand. Nanny Gong coughed discontentedly. Yunyang glanced at Nanny Gong and curled her lips. She had seen too many people, and Nanny Gong deliberately showed something that she usually hid. How could Yunyang not see that this nanny was not an ordinary person? Since Miss Luo can be so beautiful, it's definitely not as simple as using these things. What other secret methods do you have? Can you share them with me? To say that Jingwan could be well, it was not only because of those things. If it was really so magical, she didn't need to do anything else. She just needed to apply those things on her body. Then, all the people who had used these things would be like Jingwan. Then, the beauty industry would reach the peak at this time, and there would be nothing left for the later generations. In fact, Jingwan didn't use many things to maintain her skin. They just played an auxiliary role. Most of the time, she nourished her skin internally. Her endocrine was balanced, and there was no toxin in her body. In this way, it was difficult for her to look bad. Therefore, Jingwan was not stingy. She simply told Nanny Gong some methods to maintain her health. In fact, it was not only Jingwan and Nanny Gong who knew these methods. Many people knew them. It was just that what Jingwan knew was combined with what Nanny Gong knew. In addition, Nanny Gong put in a lot of effort on her, so the best effect was achieved. Therefore, after Jingwan said those things, Yunyang thought that Jingwan was hiding something. However, she was not a narrow-minded person. She didn't have a bad opinion of Jingwan because of this. Anyway, she was just a little girl. I have something to do, so I can't keep you here. After the things are made, I'll ask someone to send them to you. If there is something not satisfactory, you can tell me. Jingwan also saw that Yunyang didn't believe her, so she didn't say anything more. She just got up and left. Yunyang asked someone to pack a large bag of various rouge, face powder, and creams from Rouge Pavilion for her. Of course you don't like these. But there should be many people who like them. After all, there are several kinds of them, which are used by the concubines in the palace. Yunyang smiled and winked. Jingwan saw what was in the bag with her own eyes. After thinking about the selling price she had seen before, she roughly calculated that it was close to 10,000 taels of silver. Yunyang gave it to her without blinking her eyes. Seeing this, Yunyang was quite speechless. They were all rich people. Jingwan, who thought that she was a little rich woman, would never think of herself as a rich person in the future. Jingwan, who was shocked, left Rouge Pavilion expressionlessly. She didn't think about it. She gave away treasures like the 18th scholar just like that. That was more valuable, okay? After Jingwan and the others left, the smile on Yunyang's face disappeared. At that moment, her aura became fierce. Even though she was still wearing clothes, you couldn't feel the slightest bit of the aura of a prostitute. If Jingwan saw her now, she would probably use 2 words to describe her: queen. She casually ran her fingers through her hair. Take the things away and let the masters quickly make it. Then, make a place for it in the shop. As for what third Miss Luo said, you all heard it. I don't think I need to tell you the specifics. Yes, mistress. The 2 maids beside her respectfully replied. Yunyang picked up the teacup and took a sip. Her movements were elegant and noble, and her expression was somewhat unpredictable. In the Luo family's carriage. Nanny, do you know the origin of Yunyang? Jingwan asked. Nanny Gong's expression was somewhat grave and hesitant. It was the first time Jingwan saw such an expression on her face. Jingwan became more and more curious. What's wrong? Does Nanny not know, or is it inconvenient to say? Young miss, if this servant's guess is correct, Yunyang's identity is not ordinary. Nanny Gong looked at the 2 maids in the carriage. It's not good to know too much. Jingwan understood that Yunyang was not like what she thought. She had the emperor as her lover, so she must have some other background. Yunyang was a woman who looked like she was tainted with the dust of prostitution. She was the kind of person that the women in the inner residence hated the most. However, they didn't refuse the things from the Rouge Pavilion. On one hand, it might be because the things from the Rouge Pavilion were really good. On the other hand, it might be because they knew that Yunyang wasn't an indecent person. As for Yunyang's identity, she would have to find another time to ask in private. Jingwan returned to the Luo family. Then, she bumped into Luo Jingying in the garden. Jingwan wasn't sure if she was waiting for her. However, this time, she was very well-mannered and well-mannered. Naturally, she saw the things in the maid's hands. Rouge Pavilion was the best place. How could Luo Jingying not know about it? She had only been there once. After that time, she didn't dare to go again. It wasn't that the things were bad. If she could, she would have emptied the place. However, the cheapest small box of rouge there cost more than 100 taels. Moreover, such a small box could barely last for a month. Third sister went out this time and bought a lot of things. Fourth sister, are you talking about these? I didn't buy them. The owner of the Rouge Pavilion gave them to me as a gift. Third sister is really likable. The things that cost at least a few thousand taels were given as a gift. She is really generous. Yes, Yunyang is really generous. Yunyang. Although Rouge Pavilion was a place that sold things for women, it was such a big business that it couldn't be a private property of a woman, right? Luo Jingwan was puffing herself up at her own cost, or she didn't dare to admit it. Fourth sister doesn't know that the owner of Rouge Pavilion is called Yunyang. I thought this was a well-known thing. Of course younger sister knows. Could she admit that she had been in the capital for a few years and still be so ignorant? Jingwan nodded. The reason why Yunyang is so generous is all thanks to fourth sister. Because of fourth sister, Jin Qinwang found out about third sister's secret skincare recipe and wanted to give it to noble consort Su. However, Jin Qinwang didn't want the recipe, he wanted the finished product. But the things in third sister's hands, people who used them all said that they were good. They felt that when the time came, the people who used them wouldn't only be noble consort Su. No matter how capable third sister is, you can't make that much. It's too troublesome to open your own shop, so you simply went to Rouge Pavilion. Unexpectedly, you just happened to run into Yunyang. Sigh, elder sister is still troubled over how to deal with it. After all, fourth sister also knows that elder sister usually doesn't use these things. You don't want to give them all to me. Luo Jingying almost shouted out these words. Fortunately, she held it in, but she pursed her lips and gritted her teeth. She didn't open her mouth for a long time. She was worried that once she opened her mouth, she would lose her composure again. What really made her eyes red was that 40% bonus. 40%. She didn't know how much it was, but she was sure that even if Luo Jingwan didn't do anything for the rest of her life, it was enough for her to squander. Fourth sister tried every means to dig out the secret recipe from my hands. Now that she got what she wanted, I believe that it won't be long before Rouge Pavilion will release the first batch. However, listening to Yunyang's words, it will probably be a bit expensive. It will probably be a few times more expensive than the ones in her shop, a dozen times, or even 100 times more expensive. Fourth sister, have you prepared the money? Luo Jingying's fingernails dug deeply into her palms, but she didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. Was this the result of all her calculations? Not to mention that she was locked up for 10 to 20 days, she couldn't afford to use those things now. She suddenly regretted. She regretted being so impulsive. If she had held back and waited a little longer, perhaps things wouldn't have turned out this way. She clearly wanted to get the secret recipe and make sure that Luo Jingwan didn't get any benefits. However, she didn't achieve any of her goals. Jingwan chuckled as she approached Luo Jingying. After all, it's my recipe. If my family buys it, it will only cost 10% of the price. Of course, no one has a fixed amount every month. Luo Jingying's face lit up with joy. However, that doesn't include you. If you buy it, it will cost 10 times more than the original price. Luo Jingwan, fourth sister, lower your voice. You just came out of the small temple. Don't tell me you want to be locked up again. Luo Jingying was filled with hatred, but she couldn't do anything to Jingwan. I heard that third sister's engagement was broken off. Jingwan's smile became playful. Her pink lips parted slightly. Childish. Then, she brushed past Luo Jingying. Luo Jingying trembled with anger. She didn't expect that she didn't manage to hurt Luo Jingwan, that little bitch. Oh, that's right. There's one more thing that fourth sister should know in advance. Jingwan stopped after taking 2 steps. Yesterday, Li Ruyu's status as a princess was revoked by His Majesty. There will probably be an official imperial edict about this matter in 2 days. Luo Jingying's body couldn't help but sway. The servant girl beside her hurriedly reached out to help her, but she slapped her hand away. Luo Jingying didn't know the reason, but Luo Jingwan just had to tell her at this time. She couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. And the more wrong it was, the more she let her imagination run wild. Originally, because she had been locked up for too long, her body was weak. Now, she felt like she was about to collapse. After walking far away, Jingwan looked back. Her expression didn't change at all. As the saying goes, the sins of heaven can be forgiven, but the sins of one's own are the hardest to bear. Luo Jingying brought this upon herself. On the other side, Luo Jingqiang originally wanted to avoid Luo Jingying. She didn't expect third sister to come back. Thus, she heard every word of their conversation. She touched the back of her left hand with her right hand and sneered in her heart. She was the only one who went against third sister. Look at the other sisters. Which one of them didn't get third sister's favor? Now, she went for wool and came home shorn. She should have bought those things at a low price. But even if it was only 10% of the original price, she probably couldn't buy them every month. However, it didn't matter. She was going to get married in less than half a month. She could give her share to others. Not only could she please her in-laws, she might even be able to exchange it for benefits. In short, she just didn't want to give her Luo Jingying. If she gave it to others, she would at least return a smile. But if she gave her Luo Jingying, even if you gave her your own flesh and blood, she would probably still dislike the fishy smell. In that case, since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, there was no need to be submissive to her Luo Jingying. That's right. Luo Jingqiang was going to get married in less than half a month. It would be 10 days after Luo Jingbo married Sun Yijia. However, everyone in the Luo family was preparing for Luo Jingbo's wedding. It was as if she had completely forgotten about it. She didn't really care. After all, she was only a concubine's daughter. Among the many girls in the Luo family, she was one of the few with the lowest status. The other few were still very young. If she had the same attitude as Luo Jingying, she was afraid that she would have died long ago. Luo Jingqiang openly left from behind the flowers. She was clearly telling Luo Jingying that she had heard everything. Luo Jingying wanted to vent her anger on this concubine's older sister. Unfortunately, she had the heart but was powerless. She shouted twice, but Luo Jingqiang simply ignored her. Luo Jingying almost had a heart attack. Now, even this bitch, who used to wag her tail behind her, dared to show her disdain. She was really too kind to her in the past. Jingwan returned to the Haitang house and divided the rouge and powder she brought back. Her mother, aunts, including Mrs. Liu, everyone had a share, but there were differences in quality. Then, she gave Luo Jingqiang a share. As for the other sisters, Luo Jingyu was 13 years old. In this place, she had already entered the ranks of the big girls, so she also reserved a share for her. Even so, there were still a lot left. She wanted to give it to her maidservants, but Mama Gong didn't allow it. The maidservants used the same things as their masters. There were no rules. If other servants in the mansion knew about it, there would be more trouble. So, the maidservants didn't want it. Thus, Jingwan decided to give her eldest cousin sister and her aunts a portion each. She gave her eldest cousin sister's portion to her eldest aunt so that she could send someone to deliver it to her. She gave her aunt's portion to her grandmother. As for the remaining portion, she gave half to her mother so that she could give it to her close friends. She gave the rest to her grandmother so that she could decide who to give it to. As a result, all the maidservants in the Hai Tang house went out together to send the gifts to each branch. All the servants in the mansion saw this and were all amazed by the third young lady's wealth. Jingwan took advantage of this time to ask Mama Gong about Yunyang's identity. "Young lady, if I'm not wrong, Yunyang is His Majesty's little aunt. She was once married to the northern Xiongnu people for peace." Although Jingwan had thought highly of Yunyang's identity as much as possible, she was still shocked by Mama Gong's words. This princess was very famous in the Qi Yuan dynasty. She had been a figure for more than 30 years. These young ladies had heard of her glorious achievements. Princess Heang was only a few years older than Lu Qingdi. She was the daughter of Lu Qingdi's grandfather. It could be said that she was raised by Lu Qingdi's father. Although this princess was a woman, she had the heart of a man. Of course, it didn't mean that she had the ambition of coveting the throne. It was just her temperament. She knew everything that a woman should know. She also knew everything that a woman shouldn't know. She knew how to play with books, swords, and spears. Most importantly, she was uninhibited by nature. Li Ryu was nothing compared to this princess. To her, these were not worth mentioning.